Well, Biggs, we've just watched the British and Irish Lions announcement for 2025. What are your initial reactions from that squad, mate?
It was exciting, wasn't it? Huh? I've said just before that, that's the first time in, I think, 16 years since I properly started that I watched it with no real panic or worry or excitement in terms of from a personal point of view. So it was nice seeing the other players suffer for a bit. Initial reaction, I think it's a team of players who generally, the core of it is players who Andy Farrell trusts, and a team that has kind of players who have kind of been there, done it a little bit across on a general basis. You know, you look at selections like maybe a Kelleher, a Ryan in the second row, a Mac Hansen in the back row, Guy Ringrow. You know, players who he knows can deliver on the big stage. And I think there's quite a good blend between kind of the picking on form and picking on reputation in a sense of those players who I've mentioned who he obviously knows well, but form players like your Freemans, your Jack Morgans, your Pollocks, and those guys with a few spanners chucked in there as well, in the works chucked in there. But I think it's an exciting selection.
And tour captain Maro Itoje?
Yeah, the right choice. I think obviously with the news of Doris, I think it was pretty much a straight shootout, wasn't it, between the two of them by all accounts, and from looking at the last 12 months or so, and with the news of Doris, I think it was the right choice. You know, he's kind of, again, someone who Andy Farrell knows and trusts. I think when you are a Lions captain, you have to kind of have three things. You have to be sure of your place, which I think Maro is. I think you have to have the respect of the players, which I think Maro does, considering his CV and what he's achieved in the game. And I think you have to have the respect of the coaches. And obviously with Andy Farrell and the other guys, he's going to have that as well. So I think he ticks all the boxes massively, and I think he's the right choice and the best guy for the job.
So we had a lot of chat about this beforehand, and he's picked Finn Smith, Finn Russell, and Marcus Smith for the 10s. What's the thinking there, mate?
I think the first two, were fairly secure. I certainly think Finn Russell. I always think when you talk about selection meetings, it's almost the ones that you don't cover are almost like the ones who kind of were guaranteed in a sense, you know. So I think Finn Russell was, and still is, a fair bit ahead of the other two in the race for that first test. But I think it was interesting, the game on the weekend with Leinster and Northampton. I think had Sam Prendergast had the game that Finn Smith had and vice versa, Finn Smith had the game Sam Prendergast had, would that have made a difference? Now, I suppose, we may have to ask Andy Farrell that, or, we may never get the answer to that question. But I think it was really interesting the weekend that clearly Finn Smith has been playing well, but probably that match probably pushed his cause even more so and probably put him into that category of just below Finn Russell. And then I'm really pleased for Marcus Smith because I know that he's had a really tough year. I actually picked him in my team on the bench, and I think that's a big reason why he's got in the team. I think his versatility to play 10, to cover 15, if you're going maybe a 6-2 split on the bench. I know you've picked Elliot Daly as well, and guys maybe like your Kinghorns and people who can sort of cover a couple of positions. But I think being able to have a 10 and 15 on the bench on a 6-2 split is pretty important. So I think he's got in there because of that. A little bit of a point of difference as well. He is a little bit different to a Finn Russell and a Finn Smith, who are quite similar-ish players in terms of they love, putting shape on the game, spraying passes, picking defenders off, etc. Whereas Marcus is a lot more of an open field threat, beat you one-on-one with a step, a bit of pace, whatever it is. So I think he brings a different dynamic. Whereas if you'd have picked Sam Prendergast as well, I think they're three fairly similar, quite system-based players, maybe with Finn having a little bit more of the flair than the other two. So I think it's, I think when you look at the rest of the squad and the rest of the makeup, I think it makes sense in that. But I think, I was thinking, maybe Marcus would have been thinking maybe his chances had slipped away with being moved around into that position, and then a poor sort of post Six Nations with Quins. So I think he'd be over the moon, and I am pleased for him. As for Finn Smith as well. So I think Finn Russell was there or thereabouts anyway, and I'm pleased for the two Smith boys.
And probably the most hotly contested positions then, those three in the back row. So we've got Josh van der Fleer, Tom Curry, Ben Earl, Henry Pollock, Jack Conan and Jack Morgan. What are you thinking there?
I like the Welsh accent for Jack Morgan as well.
Did you like that, mate? Yeah,
I did,
practiced
mate.
that
You've been
before we
practicing
came on.
that last night, hadn't you? I think, I mean, we said it in the pod on earlier in the week, didn't we? We said he's not going away, this Pollock. He ain't going anywhere, is he? He's going to keep coming, and he ain't gonna shy away on tour. He's not going to be shy and timid in terms of meeting your Itogis, your Furlongs, your Mitchells, your Gibson Parks, and all these guys. He's going to keep on coming, and I'm thrilled to bits. And I think he's exactly kind of what rugby needs at the minute. He's a personality. He's in banging form. So I think he's fully deserving of his place. There's not a huge amount of actual back rowers, are there? I think, and that's why he's probably gone for a Byrne and Chess. I mean, Tadhg Byrne is not far off being ready for that first test anyway, I don't think. But he's got the ability to play six, same as Chesham. And aside from Conan, they're all quite similar, aren't they, in terms of your Tom Curry, Ben Earl, Jack Morgan, Pollock and Van der Fleer. They're all quite sort of hybrid-y in terms of they're all dynamic, good over the ball, explosive, but probably haven't got, we chatted about this off air, if you're playing South Africa, I think the makeup of your back row is different. But I think Jack Conan's job now almost becomes even more important, and he almost becomes one of the most important players for this Lions squad, because he has to be in the team basically for his ball carrying. You know what I mean? You've got the flyers around him. You've got the guys in the row who are going to do the work. But he becomes really important now in terms of that focal point, a little bit like what England had with Vunipola, what Wales have had with, and what the Lions have had with Faletau and things. And let's not forget, Jack Conan started all three tests 4 years ago. So, you know what I mean? He knows what's required in big matches, in Lions tours, etc. But I also think the way that he's made that back row up has probably helped with his selection in that front row, because you look at Genge, Porter, Schumann are all effectively back rowers in open play, along with your Ferguson and Furlong and Stewart, along with Cowan-Dickey, Kelleher, Sheehan. All, in open play, all 9 of those could play back row in terms of your carrying and your jackling and your work, etc. So I think that's why he's maybe been allowed a bit more flexibility to go and get some fetchers and some young, explosive, energetic back row, as opposed to maybe if you were playing a South Africa and a couple more line-out options and more defence options.
So who in this squad then would you say is the biggest surprise? Who shocked you the most?
I think I didn't expect to see Elliot Daly's name, but that's not. But I just think that nobody's really talked about it in that sense, have they? But but then when I look back and when his name was announced, I was kind of thinking, well, he ticks a lot of boxes, can play 30, and that's what he did 4 years ago. He played in every one of the warm-up games. His bag was absolutely jam-packed with jerseys because he was played in every game, so he had no room in his bag with all the jerseys. Can play 13, 15 wing, long-range goal kicking, left-footed option. So I kind of think when you look back, it actually makes quite a lot of sense to pick someone like him. I think Scott Cummins in the second row, I thought I was surprised at his selection. I think he has been good for Scotland, but I think somebody like maybe a Dave Ribbons who has been really, really good for. I know he's not playing international rugby and bits and pieces, so that may have counted against him being in France, etc. But maybe, I didn't expect to see his name. And if you're asking me honestly, that's probably who I would have said is a bigger surprise. What about you, Rob? Any real surprises for you?
I was quite surprised to see probably Thomas Williams there. I know it's kind of that third scrum half choice was probably the toughest one to pick. I know we did a video on it, didn't we, about those selections at 9. And I think it probably really was a toss-up between him and Ben White, Scotland and Toulon. But yeah, I think he probably just about edges it on the form for Gloucester, how he has been playing. Maybe also even the fact that, only having one other Welshman in the squad, maybe that played into the selectors' minds, only taking one Welsh player is probably quite a big statement. So maybe if it was 50-50, maybe that did play into the selectors' minds. I'm not sure. But yeah, I think Thomas Williams, not that he doesn't deserve it, but I think it must have been that will have been a really close choice.
I think you're spot on there. I don't think anybody would have had any complaints if Ben White had been picked on that plane. I think he had a brilliant. He probably had a better Six Nations than Thomas Williams, probably by a fair bit. But I think probably Thomas's form off the back, and maybe being in France, being out of mind a little bit, maybe counted against Ben, but he's been excellent when he has played. But I will say Thomas Williams has got that X factor. He's got that ability to change the game from that point of view as well. So yeah, I agree. It really would have been, I think, an absolute flip of a coin, that one.
So on that then, who do you think's been the unluckiest to miss out? Obviously factoring in Caelan Doris to the injury as well, which is pretty gutting. And hopefully as well, if he does get fit, maybe he can get called up at a later date maybe. But
yeah, probably Ben White is particularly unlucky because it probably was. I look at the rest of the squad and I think where would there have been real 50-50 calls? And I think that 9 position would have been one of them, the one we've just spoken about. I think potentially between Gary Ringrose and Robbie Henshaw, potentially. I think potentially Pierre Schumann and Nicky Smith. I look elsewhere. Maybe a David Ribbons is unlucky in terms of that. But I look elsewhere and I don't see that many other ones where I think that was a real 50-50 call. And who would you have picked? Who would you pick instead of him? For the names that have been selected. So I think the ones I've just mentioned probably are the ones that have missed out. And I think that probably Ben White is the unluckiest because I think it really would have been the 50, the most 50-50 of call in selection personally.
Yeah, I do think that Ben Curry's probably will count himself unlucky not to be on the plane, as will Jack Willis. But yeah, it's absolutely stacked that across that back row, isn't it? So it's very difficult to.
They can blame the young man from Northampton for that. Probably his form is just. But that just goes to show, doesn't it? If you keep putting in performances, doesn't matter if you've got 1 cap, if you're 20, 35, 100 caps, whatever it is. Play well for your club, play well for your country when you get the chance. Keep backing it up. And you get a chance. But yeah, I think probably with the makeup of that back row, I think they've got a fair bit of cover in that Ben Curry type role. Do you know what I mean?
Who do you think are going to be the key players in this squad then? Because for me, it does seem like I still am not 100% certain what his test starting 15 is going to be.
I look at it this way, Rob. I look at the squad. I wrote as the names were being read out, I wrote them all down. And I've got 3 who I think are absolute certs. I'm not talking about probably will play, or there's a good chance he's going to play or be on the bench or whatever. I've got 3 absolute certs. Do you want to guess? Do you want to have a guess at any of them?
Well, I told you he's got to be the first name on the team sheet, hasn't he?
Like you said,
if you name captain, you have to be the first name on the team sheet.
And so Toji's one of them. So you got two more.
Beyond that, I think you have to Dan Sheehan.
Dan Sheehan is there. Yep. I think Dan Sheehan is, barring injury, I think he starts that first test.
Do you think he was in the conversation for the captaincy?
I think he was in the conversation for being a captain on tour if Maro doesn't play in some of the games, or if Maro gets injured, or for any particular reason. I think when you probably stack up, I think Maro probably had a bit too much in the captaincy experience side of things. But I think you're right. Those 2 names you've said are absolutely nailed on. And the third one I went for was Jameson Gibson Park. So when I look at those, when you ask me who are the key players, and the Lions tour watch, I think you have to say, as it stands at the minute, those three are pretty much nailed on, barring anything extraordinary happening. So when you ask me who are the key players, I have to go with those three. I think Itoje for his overall leadership and probably ability to call the line out and set piece detail. I think when you look at Dan Sheehan, who's just, by far and away the best hooker in Britain and Ireland by some distance, his try-scoring form, his ability to effectively act as an extra back rower, his pace, his power, etc., his line-out stats. I think he starts, and he is important for, again, because of potentially the lack of carrying options, or typically carrying options in that back row. He will have to share the load there. And I think Gibson Park, again, we've spoken about it being quite a heavily Irish.
I wondered who your third one was.
Yeah, so Gibson Park is that third one for me. I think given how heavily based the amount of Irish players are on the tour, given that the staff are quite highly numbered in Ireland's favour, I think he's going to know that system inside out. I think he has got the ability to pick the pace of the game up. His kicking game is excellent. So I think those three for me start, and those three, because they are nailed on to start, barring anything happening, I think those three become the most important players around. And then I don't think there's many other places who you could say, probably Finn Russell starts the first test. Probably Jack Conan starts the first test at 8. Probably Tyke Burns starts the first test in the row with Itoje. But I look elsewhere, and I don't think there's anybody else who you can say is nailed on. Is that a fair assumption, Rob? Or
yes, I think they're probably the only three. You could make an argument for Alex Mitchell's performance at the weekend. Obviously, Saints against Leinster, he looked great, but I think, the way Faz has picked this team, it's like you said, it's guys he knows, he trusts. He obviously puts a lot of faith in Gibson Park in that Irish team, so you can see why he's going to do the same again here, isn't he?
Yeah, and I think that goes back to something we mentioned at the start of this video, where it's a mix between players banging form and players who he trusts. And that's always the way on a Lions tour. You have to have players who you can count on, even if they're not out-and-out starters, but people who you know. And also as well, I think what people maybe forget, that everyone's talking about technical, tactical strengths. But Andy Farrell's going to know these Irish players a lot better than he's going to know the Welsh players or the Scottish players or the English players to an extent. And you're going to want to have good characters on a Lions tour as well. Yes, it's important that you make sure that you're the best in your position and you're on form and etc. But you have to have good characters on tour, and he will know those Irish players and players who he's selected a lot better than potentially other guys from other countries. So I think that plays a part on a Lions tour, just not just as much, but I think that's quite an important part if things are sort of 50-50-ish as well. Lions Tour Watch brought to you by Vodafone. The key players in this squad are Dan Sheehan, Jameson Gibson Park, and Maro Itoje.
Who do you reckon is the first person on a reserve list who's going to be the first bloke to get called up if there is an injury? Or give us one forward and one back.
One forward and one back. Well, I think Ben White is first reserve, so I'm sticking with that. My club mate, I think he's going to be first reserve if there's an injury at 9. I actually, the other quick point, I don't think there's going to be that many. If there's an injury in, let's just go centres and back 3, I don't think they'll call anyone up, because I think they've almost got enough cover with the versatility they've picked in Daly and Kinghorn, in Hanson, Ringrose, etc., to sort of probably cover that. And then probably back row, I do think somebody like a Jack Willis, I think he can be, he can be a little bit unfortunate that he's missed out. But I think if there is an injury to those, and I know you mentioned Ben Curry, but I think Jack Willis is probably just ahead of that and gets the call first up.
He'll be banging fitness as well, won't he? Obviously, top 14 goes on a little bit longer, so he could jump straight on a plane and jump straight into it, couldn't he?
Yeah, he's going to be match ready, match fit, and I think as well, you kind of like, if you are playing outside of the UK and Ireland, you kind of need to be absolutely smashing it out of the park, and he has. So I think he's going to be right in the mix for if there's an injury, and that's the important thing to say as well, Rob. Like, all these players who've been selected, it's an amazing honour and it's incredible, that feeling. But there's still a lot of rugby to play before anybody steps on that plane to Australia. So there will be injuries. There will be players in this squad. We've mentioned Caelan Doris, who's had it taken away from him from an injury, and potentially would have been captain. So not just being in the squad, but would have been captain to have missed out from injury. So there will be players in this squad who may potentially miss out, and players who haven't been selected originally will get an opportunity as well. So that's just how it goes. But I overall, are you happy with the makeup of the squad, Rob?
I think so. I think so. I am a little bit. I did say to you beforehand. The only reservation I have is that we appear to be full of, in inverted commas, hybrid players that can play across multiple positions. And the only concern is that, you pick kind of jack of all trades, masters of none, maybe. That is the only concern with it. But there's no denying it's a squad full of exceptional players, is there?
Yeah, and I think it's got, the quality of this squad has got enough to beat Australia, hasn't it? If they perform well, if they gel together. I think, like we've mentioned, Australia are going to put up a lot sterner challenge than I think people thought 12 months ago. But I think the makeup of this squad, the dynamic, the versatility, the different ways it can play. And I think we mentioned this in one of the videos. I think the centres is quite an interesting one, because effectively you've got a Scottish partnership and an Irish partnership with Elliot Daly, who can potentially sit on the bench or offer something slightly different, whether he plays with Bundy Aki, whether he plays with Tuipulotu. So I think there is a little bit of partnership work there. Considering the rest of the squad is going to be probably not that in sync from a club country type of point of view. Do you know what I mean? Whereas you'll probably have your Gibson Park, Finn Russell, maybe a Scottish or an Irish pair, and then you may have your Freeman, your Kinghorn, your Keenan, your Lowe. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like there's not that many combinations in the whole squad, barring maybe the front row and the centres, where you can sort of hang your hat on. So I think that's quite an important one as well.
Who's the one player, as we sat and watched this live, when the name was read out, that you were buzzing to see?
I know everyone. It is the stock answer, and he's getting all the hype, and he's.
Don't say Biggs. Come on.
But you'd like to be his agent at the minute, wouldn't you? In terms of
100%.
His agent must be rubbing his hands. I mean, Northampton must be absolutely dreading that door or that phone ringing and it's Henry Pollock's agent at the minute.
I hope he's locked into a long-term deal.
Yeah, I hope he signed a 5-year and he's on. He's gonna. His personality feels like he needs to be brought down now and again. But no, I think there is obvious things for Henry Pollock being there. But I'm really, really excited to see Marcus Smith go. I wasn't 100% sure if he was going to make the tour, but I am really excited to see him in a team with this much quality and against the teams that they're probably likely to play in the build up to it. They'll probably get quite a lot of ball. It'll be quite fast and loose, the way that they look like they're going to play with the makeup of the team. So I'm excited to get him on the ball a fair bit more and show everyone what he can do. Because I think people may have forgot what he can do in the last 3 months or so, given how difficult things have been. I am also, one other name before I ask you, Rob, I want to see Sione Tuipulotu in action as well, fully fit. But I think he's one of these players, and there's not that many players on this list who probably need a little bit of game time. I think everybody else is fairly game ready and game fit and match fit. But I think he's probably one that needs, clearly, obviously, it goes without saying, but needs a little bit of game time. What about you, Rob? Who are you looking forward to seeing? You can't say. Let's just say Henry Pollock as well. Let's get him an extra 0 on his contract. He may give us 10%, Rob. You never know.
He might. Yeah, we had him on the Rugby Pod the other week, actually, didn't we?
Yeah.
Chuffed to see Finn Smith make the cut, because I think he's been excellent for a long time for a club, and then obviously last Six Nations got a couple of starts for England as well. So it's great to see him. really pleased to see Hugh Jones get the nod as well, because he's been class for a long time, and I think his partnership with Sione Tuipulotu has been great for Scotland. And that will have been one, we're looking at like Henshaw. That'll have been a tricky conversation, but I'm really pleased to see him there, and it would be good to see a bit of a Scottish contingent through that back line with with a Finn Russell at 10 and Hugh Pilotu in the centres, I think.
Yeah, I think that you made an interesting point there, Rob. I think if we expect Finn Russell to start at 10, there potentially could be a bit of a Scottish spine there with Finn Russell, with Tuipulotu, with Jones, with Kinghorn, Van der Merwe, potentially, you know what I mean? There could be a bit of a spot. And, and one thing we have to say, the Scots, certainly from a backline and attacking point of view, are a very, very strong attacking unit, aren't they? So, you'd want to have a lot of those guys involved. But I do think it's wide open, and that's why going back to when you asked me who was kind of like the Lions tour watch and who you think are the key players, I think outside of the three names I've said in terms of Itoje, Sheehan and Gibson Park, I don't think anybody else's name is penciled in today. I think it's a squad that's been picked, whereas on previous other tours, you could maybe say, maybe there's a few more than two or three who are really sort of penciled in. I feel like as well, I feel like I need to address the elephant in the room, Rob, that we're only two Welsh guys on tour as well, which is not a surprise considering that the last sort of 18 months or 2 years that Welsh rugby has had. But it does just go to show where, again, if you do fall off in Lions years and your form is poor from a team point of view, it just goes to show, doesn't it, that that does clearly impact selection. I think it's the lowest number they've had on tour ever. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Which
it's
is
significantly lower, yeah.
Yeah, so that just goes to show where things are at, and potentially if you'd have there's a lot of English players on the tour, which maybe before the Six Nations or the autumn you may not have guessed that there'd be as many there as well. Do you know what I mean? So, but only two Welshmen on tour is a disappointment considering the amount that have been on previous tours in the last 2 or 3 tours.
Just give me a bit of insight now, Biggs, as I know, as a man who has missed out on Lions tours. You've been on tours, you've missed out on tours. What happens to those lads who do miss out? Do you get a courtesy call, or do you find out the same way that we've just found out today? They stick the names up and that's it.
That's exactly it. I certainly didn't get a courtesy call in 2013. No, that's for sure. Considering I was the only player of that 2013 or the 33 game to miss out, I didn't get a courtesy call before or afterwards.
Not that you're bitter, mate.
I'm not bitter about that at all. No. Do you know what? When we were watching it, we were chatting and we were saying, like, how good is this? Because this is one of the few times in sport, let alone rugby, where you find out as a player, like, the same time as guys working in an office in London or Edinburgh, Cardiff, Dublin. And I think it's so special to keep that. And for me, my sort of 3 experiences, I was in 2013, I was in London meeting my agent, and didn't hear my name get read out. And it was kind of like you just want to lock yourself away in your own house for what feels like a week and just not deal with your phone, not deal with your engaging with people, your club mates. 2017, I was kind of like a little bit more 50-50 where I wasn't quite sure. So the boys watched it in the Ospreys together, but I just went across the road and did some kicking for half an hour because I just couldn't bear to watch it and imagine the disappointment if I wasn't picked. And then I remember I sort of came back to the car, picked my phone up, and there was like 150 messages on WhatsApp or whatever. And I thought, well, it's either people being really nice, commiserating me, or I've done the job quite well. So that was really cool to do that. And then 2021, I posted something on Instagram actually saying Chris Boyd called us in, stopped the session for Saints 4 years ago, and announced myself in court. So that was a really cool experience. But I was a lot more confident in 2021 of being selected than the previous couple of years. So I kind of like, I didn't, it wasn't as much of a shock. But I think it is an awesome thing that like nobody finds out before that. And it's like people like the French guys are asking me in the change room today. They're like, no, surely people have been told or been given the heads up. And I was like, no, it's literally, you find out on the announcement the same as everyone else, which is awesome.
Right, Biggs. finally then, with the squad that's been announced, I think you said earlier that you are quite confident that they can beat Australia. What's your prediction for the tour?
I think that the Lions will win 2-1. I think Australia, with the country behind them, with a little bit more belief than they had 12 months ago, I think they've got the quality in their squad to nick a test match. But I think with the squad that's just been announced, with the experience and the players who've been there, done it, and the players who are banging form and almost have no fear, I think this Lions squad is just good enough. Not just good enough, but I think they'll win 2-1. I think it'll be a 2-1. I don't think it'll be a whitewash like everyone thinks. I don't think Australia are quite ready enough to win the test series against this team. So I think it'll be 2-1 to the Lions. Is that about what you think, Rob?
3-0 Lions. That's what I'm saying.
You're chucking it out there. Bold. Bold. You're giving yourself no margin for error there, Rob.
Nah, all in, mate. Right.
Nice.
Cheers, Biggs.
Cheers, Rob.